you go.
Yep, all right, recording started. So kick things off, our customary land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and the land. I'd like to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship of the land on which we all live. And then a Teams chat note, since this meeting is partly virtual, partly in person, I want to mention that that the Teams chat is not part of the public record for the meeting. So if you have a comment that you make in the chat, be sure to speak it out loud as well so that it gets entered into the record. And so I think with that, I think we can proceed with our roll call.
Sorry. Mr. Plata?
Present.
Mr. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Hobson?
Here.
Mr. Lipton will be here a little later. Mr. Harvey?
Present.
Ms. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Kamani? Ms. Warfield?
Present.
Mr. Helzer?
Present.
You have a quorum.
All right, very good. We have a forum to do business. So next up is the approval of the agenda. I don't know if folks have the agenda, if you guys have it in front of you or have had a chance to review. If so, I would hear a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, Carmela Warfield, move to approve the agenda as presented.
All right, is there a second?
This is Lindsay.
This is Brian.
All right, very good. Agenda is approved. So we do have a few new members. I think for Robert, I think this is your first meeting, and then I think Matthew, I think you just joined us for the last meeting, and then we also have Mark, who has a kind of a standing commitment, and will have to join us at 12 today as his plan. But one item that we have on our agenda is about the selection of a vice chair. Currently, I'm chair right now, and I think I've been chair. This is actually my second tour of duty as chair, and I think I just became chair again this spring. I don't even remember exactly when. But our prior vice chair, Carolyn Hall, her term expired, and so she was not reappointed to the Budget Advisory Commission. So we do not currently have a vice chair. So for those of you that aren't super familiar with all the responsibilities, the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission reports to the Assembly once a month at a work session. There's a Budget and Finance Committee at the Assembly, Committee of the Whole that meets once a month on Thursday. It's I think it's the third Thursday of the month, so it'd be next week. So the chair does that, and then the chair also, of course, oversees these meetings. The vice chair, it simply acts as chair when chair is unavailable. And I have found that it's pretty important to have a good, pretty active vice chair. A lot of times, I've been vice chair as well. A lot of times, the vice chair will go to the Assembly work session with the chair. Has to step in often when the chair isn't available. So if you're vice chair, you probably do have to step in and chair meetings once in a while when the chair isn't available, traveling, or whatever it might be. So it's going to be pretty important to get that position filled. I am curious if, I think the standard practice here would be to call for nominations, but I'm also not sure if anybody out there has thought about this and is explicitly interested in it. And if anybody actually wants to be nominated, maybe a good opportunity to raise your hand, and then somebody else can nominate you.
Mr. Chair, this is Carmela Warfield. I have a question, if I may.
Please.
You mentioned there's one of our members, one of our fellow commissioners will be joining us at noon. And then also I see that Al Tamani isn't here. Will he be here at noon as well? And would it be possible with those two? I mean, we have quorum, so we obviously need to conduct business, but would in the event that one of those two individuals would be interested, would it be possible that we have our reports and then we could select vice chair when we have our additional member on, in the event that they would be interested in serving?
I don't have an objection to that specifically. I don't know what other folks think.
This is Brian. I would agree with Ms. Warfield on that.
Yeah, then we could, if we want to go ahead with that, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't know about Al, whether Al is planning on coming or not. We don't think we heard from Al. But yeah, Mark would be here probably in 20 minutes. That would be another person. I personally, sometimes I just see that we have quorum and I'm just grateful. I feel like could be a flash in the pan, but as long as no one's planning on leaving us before then yes, then maybe that's a good idea. We could hear a motion to rearrange the agenda to move the selection of the vice chair, maybe following the informational reports.
Mr. Chair,
by-
Carmela Warfield, I would make a motion to change the order of the day to take up action items 5A after 6. So items 6A through 6D would precede item 5A with the reorder.
Is there a second for that motion?
This is Brian. I'll second.
Okay. Do we need to go to a vote then on that?
I believe so.
Okay. Do we just ask for opposition, or is anybody opposed to that motion on the table to rearrange to move item 5 to follow 6D? If not, then I think the motion passes, and we can move on to our informational reports. First up is the chair's report. I did, I think everybody's received, except maybe Robert, received a kind of a grumpy email from me about urging more attendance and engagement for the BAC. And I'm really, really happy to see, that we have a good amount of participation here today. So that does make me happy. We have had, difficulties with obtaining quorum, for several months, and conducting business have been coming to a standstill. So I'm definitely grateful to see that. But so that's the only thing that I wanted to note. But otherwise, I think we can move on to our assembly report. I believe we have Anna Brawley here in person, and then I think Meg Zolotel also on Teams. So I will hand it over to the two of you to provide a report.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Member Zolotel is still on, because I know she's also vice chair of the rules committee. So anyways, I'll get the report.
She did.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's done. There we go.
Yeah, we figured we would be efficient. So, yeah, so hello, everybody. Welcome to the new members. And of course, I was a member of this body before, so I'm happy to see that folks are, continuing the work. So, and I'll just say also, I can't stay the whole time today, but if there's questions that come up or other things, I'm happy to answer those offline or follow up that way. But I can certainly take questions now. So, in terms of our update, so we're obviously not in the budget, or I should say the assembly's not in the budget process yet. I know the departments are hard at work on that and working with OMB and the administration to prepare the first steps in that piece. But I will share too that, the assembly is looking at kind of our budget priorities, and as co-chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, Member Zolotel and I, we're both the co-chairs, so we're looking ahead to that as well. And of course, it's going to be my first budget cycle on that side, but learning that. So we are aware that there's been discussion about, a budget that has potential cuts in the departments. And so we're also looking at preparing kind of an intent memo or resolution about looking at the impacts of a continuation budget. So as those who have been participating know, the assembly or the municipality runs on a continuation budget by default and then makes changes from that. And so we're looking at, ensuring that we have funding, knowing that we have some big challenges like vacancies and, just not enough staff to do the work. And so in the short term, that might look like a positive in our budget because we're not spending that money, but it's been having more and more impacts. So just to say that we're certainly looking at that. I'm going to go ahead and look at my cheat sheet briefly. Another thing we will be taking up at our meeting next Thursday, the Budget and Finance Committee is reviewing the selection process and awardees for the mayor's community grants. So just understanding the process behind that, from the budget perspective, that is one line item in the budget. And then there's, of course, the mayor has discretion of where those are awarded. But I know at least one of them was, I believe, $50,000. So it's above kind of the, what could be sole sourced. And so I know there's some other questions raised. So members Alatel has been tracking that more closely than I have, but that's one thing that'll be on our agenda. And then, of course, we're looking to understand where the city ended up in 2022 as far as our final budget closeout. I know OMB and the media has been hard at work at that, but also understanding just kind of what extra funding, if at all, we have in our fund balance available, and really again thinking about knowing how many big priorities we have and that they take funding, things like shelter, things like housing, public safety, kind of all of these different things that keep bubbling up, and then funding is a common theme and a common challenge. So check really quick. So is it next Thursday? Yeah, I think it's, so our meetings are the third Thursday of the month, 12:10, I think is technically the start. Because we have a meeting right before that, but yeah, essentially Thursday. Yes, first floor, City Hall, room 155. And I guess another couple of updates I'll give just generally on Assembly recent actions that are at least tangentially budget related. One big one is the port. So at our July 25th meeting, we passed two things. One is a port tariff surcharge, approving that for not for the whole port modernization project, but kind of moving that forward into the next phase. So there was a need to restructure some financing from the prior phase of that, the petroleum and cement terminal. Of course, those projects are moving forward, and then really setting the stage for being able to tackle the biggest part of the project, which is the rebuild of both Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, the two big cargo terminals. And so the other thing we passed was what's called a basis of design. So it's basically the broad parameters for what the design of those terminals will look like. And so what we did is we set those parameters for Terminal 1, and then we set some kind of guidelines for Terminal 2, but left the more specific decision about that. As you guys maybe recall, there's been discussion about that, and there was kind of different ideas thrown around, or different versions of that throughout the last few months. And so our priority is really to get agreement on that so we can move forward with the whole modernization project, because that was the point of contention, whether Terminal 2 should be built out basically to look the same as Terminal 1, or if it should be a more scaled back design that reflects, how it's being used now. Has to do with the specific operations of TOTE, which does roll on, roll off, uses ramps and doesn't need as much shoreside infrastructure, versus Matson that uses what is more an industry standard of cargo offloading using cranes and so on. So anyway, I'm getting in the weeds there, but the point is that regardless of what that second terminal looks like, really comes down to what our long-term needs are. We're looking at a 75-year time frame for the ports, the life of that port as a facility. We're past its service life right now, and it needs to be upgraded. So we're looking at that from, making sure we're making good use of the money, but also looking long-term and deciding what that port should look like, listening to our experts who are working through the costs of that larger design, and then that'll come back to us in a few months. But certainly the port is a top priority for the Assembly and for the mayor, for the whole city. And so we're also working to, again, craft our story about what the port needs to look like and how much money it will take. And then we can take that to other funders at the state and federal level, which I know has been happening and we intend to continue. So that was kind of one of the really big actions that we took. And then another one that's relevant to this group, and then I'll stop and see if there's questions, is if you remember earlier this year, voters approved, I think was it Proposition 12, the trust fund board? Or 11.
Yeah, it was somewhere towards the end.
Yeah, anyway, it might have been Prop 11. So Prop 11, well, I won't say the number. So whatever proposition it was that created a trust fund board, the Assembly passed an ordinance that basically put that board into place. And so what it does is it replaces the function of really what was held by one person at the city. Our now retired treasurer, Dan Moore, was overseeing the Muni's trust funds, and there's multiple of them. huge responsibility. And then that fund has grown significantly, especially with the sale of MLMP. So it was flagged as basically a structural risk in terms of, having one person making decisions about that much of our public funds. And so, so what the ordinance that we passed did, it repeals the Investment Advisory Commission, which, like this body was advisory, and creates a trust fund board. So there's 7 members. That board is still being seated essentially, but the goal is to get that board up and running by later this fall. So, and then they have standards they need to meet in terms of the Uniform Prudent Investor Act and certain, things that they're going to be following to make sure that we're, managing our money in a responsible way. So those are 2 big things that we have been in the works for a long time. So we'll be looking at those trust fund board appointees. I think they're on our agenda for the next, or not the next meeting. They were on our agenda, but we're going to be looking at them in September. So I know that was a lot of information, so I'll pause there and see if there's questions either on those topics or anything else that you guys have that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Assembly Member Robert? Yeah, well, let's see, I've got one. You're talking about the impacts of a continuation budget. You're talking about essentially like we work with the exact same dollar figure as last year, coming year. Or what is a continuation budget exactly?
So that's something maybe Courtney should answer in more detail, but essentially a continuation budget isn't just the exact same dollar amount, but it takes, it takes generally that idea, and then it applies things like, I think it's like what planned pay increases, or there's certain things that it does factor into, but essentially it doesn't make policy changes to the budget, if that makes sense. Okay, Courtney, I don't know if you want to.
The way that we kind of define it is this year's services at next year's price. So you take everything, the services, the cost of what we have, the same services next year, but at that cost.
So how does that look for like snow removal, or where you kind of have these, hopefully that was a one-off situation where we spent significantly more. How does that work on a continuation budget?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one I know. Okay. That is one that I need to be more informed about, but I do recall that the Assembly, this was before the new members joined the body, the Assembly approved, I think it was 1.5 million, it was a fair amount to that line item in the budget during the budget revisions. And the intent of that was recognizing the cost now, but then making sure we have money for the rest of the year, essentially in the fall and through December. Not knowing what that's going to look like, but that way we don't shortchange ourselves for next fall.
By using all of the budget.
Yeah, exactly. So what I don't remember is if that was a one-time or if that was a permanent increase to the budget. But I think things like that we need to really look at. It's in seeing, okay, where are priorities? We know things that have struggled to be fully funded or adequately funded in the past, and where do we fill those holes? So that's why the Assembly is interested in, at least the budget, the finance co-chairs are interested in looking at what just a continuation budget would cost.
And then I think it was reported, and I wish I remember the specifics, that the mayor's directed department heads to look at a couple different scenarios, including including cuts of 2%, something along those lines. So I guess we'll probably talk about that in your update or the update. Okay.
Yeah, and I would defer a question about that to them during.
Sure. I wanted to mention for the record that Al Spady has joined us. So thanks for joining us, Al.
Hello.
Any other questions for about Assembly business? I know that it sounds like a lot of updates on the port. I know that traditionally DAC hasn't done a lot of deep dives into the port, partly because I think the port has its own advisory commission or something. I think so.
Yeah, there's the port commission, and not just advisory. I don't remember exactly what their functions are, but they're one of those that has more functions than just advisory.
But yeah, I know that there's a lot of big dollar things that are happening or that need to happen there. So good to be updated there. Then I think we can move on to the ASD report, and I believe we have Katie Parrott from the school district. So yeah, go ahead and take it, Katie.
Hi, for those in the room who I haven't met yet, I'm Katie Parrott. I'm the new Senior Director for the Office of Management and Budget for ASD. I really have just 3 things to report to the Commission. One is something that I had mentioned briefly last week related to the budget revision that the administration would be putting forward to the school board for the FY24 budget. This is essentially made possible by the one-time funds that were provided and appropriated by the legislature. Initially a historic appropriation that was then cut in half through a veto by the governor, still providing approximately 25 million to ASD to be able to incorporate for existing critical needs. So we are not going to be using all of those funds in the current year's budget. About half of those funds will be set aside to be rolled forward for future budgetary needs. As you know, those are significant. However, there were a few critical or urgent, as of this year, activities and accomplishments that the district needed to be able to factor in, not least of those being implementation of the Alaska Reads Act and all of the curriculum, the training, the retraining, and then the program design and implementation of tasks and instructional activities that have to go into fully implementing that in the new year. So one-time funds that are being repurposed for Reads Act specifically. We also had a series of contractual obligations that the district had to.
Oh, and we are losing you a little bit, Katie. I'm sorry.
I think everyone else is still moving.
Yeah.
Are you able to
Her video.
Can you hear Katie? Maybe if you turn off your video, it might stabilize things. Your audio cuts in and out a little bit.
Oh, I apologize. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems to be working.
Okay, all right, great. So we also had a series of contractual obligations that were not known or fully ratified at the time of the approved budget that we worked in, including an increase to the health insurance contributions for the district's plan. We also had to factor in other contractual obligations, like a portion of the funds that we receive being allocated to the charter schools. That was around 2 million. And then also we have experienced what other districts are experiencing throughout the state and the nation in terms of increased need in substitutes to cover absences or vacancies, but also struggling to have a sufficient pool. So ASD did adjust the rates that are provided for substitute coverage to be able to incentivize having that critical need filled. So in all, those actually were presented in a budget revision to the school board as a non-action at the previous meeting, and will go before them for action and approval the meeting of August 15th this coming week. That is relevant to talking also about moving into the FY25 budget cycle and taking a look at what funds are available there. As you know, we are facing a very sizable deficit that we will have to rely on fund balance in order to provide a balanced budget, but probably not to the extent that there will be no cuts or adjustments at the time that the budget is put forward to the board and then approved, because the additional funding from the legislature or decisions at the legislative level just don't get to us quick enough to be able to be factored in. So we are, as has been previously reported, facing around a $65 million budget deficit. It does look like moving to the end of the previous fiscal year that our fund balance is in a better position than was projected, but we would caution kind of being really optimistic about that, because one of the reasons why is because we have vacancies, and we really can't provide a full throttled education program for our students when we have so many vacancies. So it's not the goal to continue to save money by having a lot of positions, critical positions, some of them that are unfilled. We really do need to, continue increasing our recruitment and retention efforts to be. Last but not least, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you cut out for a second there, but I think we got. I think we just lost a tiny bit, but I think we got what you were saying, Katie.
Okay. Last but not least, I did want to bring to the group's attention. You may have heard about a letter that was provided to Juneau School District from DEED with essentially a determination that some of the ways that their municipality was providing funds to the district outside of the cap are no longer considered compliant. But know that, sorry?
We lost you a little bit there. I think you were saying they were no longer considered compliant or allowable.
Yes, compliant or allowable outside of the cap. So an update to that, all of the other districts did receive a letter.
Oh yeah, we lost you again, Katie. Are you still on, Katie?
I am. I really apologize. This is very uncharacteristic for my connectivity. But I'll just essentially wrap up by saying that ASD was provided a letter by DEED with the other districts. And this is relevant, I think, specifically to some of the funding that's been provided to the Pupil Transportation Fund by the municipality in the past. We are currently in compliance based on DEED's definition for FY24, but it's definitely something that we will be tracking and keeping a close eye on and seeing how, the process kind of works out in Juneau's situation.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. We have questions for Katie.
Mr. Chair, this is Carmela Warfield. If I may, I appreciate the update from Ms. Parrott. Thank you very much, Katie. It was a little bit tricky for me to catch all the details with some of the lag, and I wondered if we might just have, would we be able to see a copy of the letter that you mentioned from DEED, and maybe just I think I got the gist that it's being monitored, but if she could restate, I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything with some of the tech issues, and we've all experienced those, Katie, so we understand.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the finance committee of the school board will be handling or reviewing the letter and kind of discussing this in an upcoming meeting. So that will be something that will be publicly available, and we can forward information related to that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so as I understand that issue, basically the city and borough of Juneau had been providing funding to school activities or school adjacent things that are outside of the school district budget. But the issue is whether that's allowable because state law basically caps local contributions to school districts. And so that's my understanding of the issue. And I don't know if I have that quite right, Katie.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And it can be a fairly complicated issue because of how the interrelation between impact aid and the formula funding and the cap and other things. So there was actually a really great article, I believe, I can't remember what news agency provided, but that had a really good summary of the issues and kind of how it works essentially. So I can provide a link to that if it would be of interest.
Yes, I think it would be.
Was it the KINY radio?
Yeah, I think it was one of the, yes, I was going to say K200, but I couldn't remember which one.
I can put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've acknowledged I'm not a member, so I'm kind of jumping in, but I think what it might be helpful to understand, Katie, well, one, if you could also provide that letter to the assembly, and I understand if it's not, if you guys can't forward that yet or you're working through it, but I think that would just be helpful for our information. And then specifically, I was wondering if the letter addressed school resource officers and also the pre-K funding that comes through the muni to the via the alcohol tax. I was just curious if it flagged those, if it considers those compliant or not compliant.
So the letter we received did not flag any particular items. However, it does kind of outline a fairly broad definition of what is included in the contributions that would be considered within the cap. And I think that's one of the items of discussion and something that is a conversation going between Juneau School District and DEED right now is the line has historically been drawn somewhere else. You know, this is kind of a new understanding of where that line is. And so the district is trying to get a feel for kind of the redefining of that from DEED's perspective. So I will certainly forward some information and provide the letter so that you guys can have that information.
And I'll just say that that's something that I know does affect our budget and our budget priorities. So I'll make sure that this gets back to Budget and Finance Committee as well. Thanks.
And another thing I know, and this might be a bit premature, but of that $65 million deficit you mentioned, do you have a rough sense of like what share of that is going to have to be made up of cuts versus fund balance?
That is with considering pulling in approximately $30 million of fund balance. So that's kind of factoring in the reliance of fund balance. So, you know, it's early in the process, but because, you know, without additional state resources, this is a compounding issue year after year. That is absolutely going to require cuts without new revenues. It really is something that we're going to be faced with tackling in this current in this upcoming budget cycle.
So it's really so the deficit's really like 95 million, and then it shrinks to 30 to 65 with the fund balance money.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's spicy. Other questions on ASD? All right. Well, thank you very much, Katie. I appreciate the updates.
Thanks, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
It's not your fault. That's all right. Then I guess we have our update from OMB.
Yes. So as Assemblymember Brawley pointed out, we are in the middle of our budget cycle for next year's budget, the FY 2024 budget. That process starts very early in the year in order to allow us the time to submit the information to the assembly based on our code requirements. So on September 1st, we have a code requirement to submit what is called our 120-day memo or the preliminary memo to the assembly. It's a very high 30,000 foot view of where we are at that current time. And we have a calendar that OMB puts together every year that shows the timeline of basically assembling the entire budget. So right now, the departments have submitted their proposals based on the mayor's guidance, which, as you noted, Nolan, was a request for a 2% and a 4% reduction. and what those look like. Right now, we're currently conducting, department meetings with the mayor to be able to review those proposals, go over impacts, have just robust conversations. And then we go into the decision-making process, policy decisions. That preliminary memo gets submitted kind of in that window. And then from that point, basically the month of September is the finalization of all the decisions, the building of the books and the submission to the assembly 90 days before the end of the year. So for this year, it's October 2nd. OMB will submit those budgets to the assembly based on the mayor's, proposed 2024 budget. So right now that's OMB's focus as far as tasks that we're working on. I think we can discuss for this group, how you guys want to handle the review of that budget, as far as making your recommendation, whether or not you want to have a resolution to submit to the assembly, member for them to be able to see what, the comments that the group has. So, that is what we have going on.
So the 2% and 4% reductions would they be allocated like equally across all departments, or would they be differential?
That comes in with the conversations and the discussion as we go on, is, what do those impacts look like? What does a 2% look like for this department, or a 4%, and those differences between departments and the ability to absorb those or change those with minimal or limited impacts, so it's a lot of conversation, and that's kind of where we are right now in these, very robust discussions in department meetings, is having those and what is the proposal and what does that look like and what are all those impacts. So until it is of the, final decisions, and that's why there were scenarios, is because, it's being considered in all of those areas. Yeah.
Folks have questions for Courtney? And okay, and I'm sorry, you did this, but can you go over the timeline again for how the memo and the guidance, how the budget process is going to work over the next few months?
Yeah, so in late June, early July, we send out a calendar with the mayor's guidance to departments. And it starts with them on the capital side reviewing. We have a community council survey process that starts in really early in the year, February and March. And that gives kind of the community input to be able to have that conversation in the capital kind of realm. And then that closes around the end of May, early June, so that the departments can then utilize that data when they start building their submissions on the capital side. And then the operating side, the expectation is to meet whatever the mayor's guidance is for each budget iteration. So for this year, to meet his guidance in the scenarios that were presented. And then their submissions were due last Friday. And then this week, we start the budget conversations with the departments, where we have the discussion of what do those scenarios look like? What do the impacts look like? We have those for a few weeks, and then we get into the policy discussions of, okay, now that we've had all of that data, what are the decisions going to be? And in between those meetings, when we get to September 1st, that's when the 120-day memo is submitted to the assembly. So again, it's a very high level, because we don't have decisions at that point. We aren't at a final point. I appreciate that OMB has a very high level of, trust, and, our work product is very good. And so people, I think, believe that we have data before we do, but we are truly creating these budgets and making all of this to the very end. So I've worked here for 10 years, and I've never not been creating or printing on the last day, for submission. So when we submit the 120-day, the reason is very high level and preliminary is because we don't have final decisions. There are still conversations being had. There are still decisions being made. So as much of the information as we can give at that 30,000-foot view is what we provide. And then we take the rest of that time, the next 30 days, to meet the requirement of the 90-day window to have the full budgets, made. So the complete operating budget for general government, the complete capital improvement budget, capital improvement program, and then the utility enterprise, so all of that is happening in the next month and a half, 2 months. So that's what we're doing.
Any questions on that? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, sorry, yes, before we move on, I need to leave, but I wanted to just do 2 quick follow-ups, and I apologize for getting out of order on the agenda. The first was I looked at the snow removal, so there was in the revised budget, there was a $2.5 million increase in total to the maintenance and operations department, which is where snow removal activities sit. But of that, there was 1 million that was specifically towards snow removal. So I said 1.5 million, and I should have said 1.0 million. And that is a one-time expense. So I think it is something to continue looking at. And then, and I'm glad you brought up the CIP. Just to flag, if anybody's interested, we have work sessions on a lot of different topics. 2 Fridays from now on the 25th. I'm not remembering the time, but I can send that out. We have a work session looking at the community, capital improvement project, the CIP process generally. So not setting priorities for the coming year, but kind of more troubleshooting or talking through some weaknesses in the process, especially with community councils. Those of you who have been involved in community councils, you get asked every year, and then it can be a bit of a black box. And so anyway, we're digging in with the idea of understanding how it works. Is there a way that we should be moving up the timeline to give folks more time before those decisions are made? And anyway, just kind of looking at the process improvement side of that. So you're welcome to participate, and I can send information about that. But with that, I will leave you guys to the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Assemblymember Brawley, I would love to hear information on that work session for CIP. Our community council has been very interested. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, I'll send it out. And again, we won't be at the point that we'll have any decisions or anything, but it'll be just kind of a chance to have that conversation and really help community members to engage better in that process. So I will send that link out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
Then next up, we rearranged the agenda. So now is what we can talk about the selection of a vice chair. And I think, let's see, we had Al join us, but we still don't have, it looks like Mark wasn't able to join. So we've got all but one person present from BAC. So are there any nominations for vice chair?
I'll serve if you don't have anybody.
All right, so Al is willing to serve. Is there anybody else who's interested in serving or interested in nominating someone else? So
I'll second Al's nomination. This is Carmela Warfield, Mr. Chair.
very good, very good. Okay, we've got one candidate then. Want to make sure that everybody has a chance. If there are other names that want to be mentioned, want to make sure that those come out. But otherwise, is there anybody else that wants to be nominated or that wants to nominate?
I'm sorry, I was busy on another project. Yeah, if you don't have anybody else, then I'll serve.
Thank you for stepping up and being willing. So I think procedurally we need someone to formally nominate Al. I think is what we have to do, and then we get a second for that, I believe. So does somebody want to formally nominate Mr. Toomey? And then we can get a second.
Mr. Chair, this is Carmela Warfield. I will nominate Al Toomey for service as vice chair.
Oh, right. Oh, Rachel had just fallen off, I think, a second ago. Is there a second?
This is Matthew
This is
Carter.
Brian.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I think we had both Matt and Brian jump into second. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, if one candidate on the table willing and able to serve, do we have to actually do a voice vote, or is it?
I think we would probably do opposition
Okay.
somewhere.
Is there any opposition then to Mr. Spady serving vice chair? I certainly don't have any to offer. I think Al is a veteran at this, actually. I think Al's served as chair a couple tours of duty in the past, if I'm not mistaken. If there's no opposition, then I think we've selected our new vice chair. So congratulations, Al.
Thank you.
We can be in regular contact then, if I need you to step in as in my place, and also if you're interested in attending any of the work sessions on the third Thursday, I usually like to go to those in person. If I can. Otherwise, then I think our next item is our BAC strategic planning. One item that came up, Mark Lewican, who just recently joined, and fortunately he's not here, but he had mentioned that he had a standing commitment on the Thursday that we meet that ends right around 12, and so he was worried about his ability to participate in the meeting. Of course, we don't always rearrange times for one member, but it did bring the point to mind that we have at times, since I've been on BAC, we have at times adjusted the day of the month that we meet. Sometimes we actually adjusted the length to 1 hour. We found that we didn't have quite enough time to get our business done. And by the way, Al, your camera's on, and I think we're looking at like cords and wires on your desktop there. I did want to open it up for the group about, does this time work for folks? Should we be considering a different time, a different day, different length of time? I do think that the 90-minute meetings are good because it takes a while just to get through our reports, and then to have anything to discuss afterwards, we're often kind of constrained. I just put it on the table for folks to talk about. What thoughts do you guys have?
This is Lindsay. I think that, so when I first started on the commission, we were noon to 1. And, we found that we weren't able to get through our agenda in that amount of time, which is why we lengthened the meeting at some point. But now I do feel like we are getting through our meetings a bit faster. So we could, even try like 11:45, which would, maybe coordinate a little better with the schedule. I think that we are often out a little early, more so now than we used to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. We are getting through those things faster than we did. Other discussion. What did folks think of the idea of shortening the meeting to starting 12 to 1, or it could be 11:45 to 1 if we wanted to build in a little tiny bit of buffer? Do people have a preference about that?
This is Rachel Reese. I would definitely appreciate a 12 to 1. It's been difficult for me to attend. I have a conflicting work meeting that overlaps this, and I would like to make sure that I'm able to be at the meeting. So 12 to 1 would work better for me.
Okay. Any other opinions on it?
This is Brian. I also feel like the 12 to 1 would work for my schedule as well. I am flexible, but the 12 to 1 would probably be a little easier for me as well.
Okay. Okay, so a couple voices in support of 12 to 1. I think that that's a reasonable idea. What do we think about this Thursday of the month, the second Thursday? At one point, we were the first Thursday. We changed it to the second one, I think, because we were working around. I think we were trying to follow. We were trying to follow the assembly meeting
I think there was a member previously who had a conflict on the first Thursday, so then I think you guys went to the second Thursday.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think that's how we have gotten to the second Thursday, but I don't know. I think staying away from the third Thursday, obviously, because that's the budget and finance,
Right.
is probably, but otherwise, you know, I think it's up to you guys as far as which day of the week. I don't know that it has to stay on a Thursday. I don't know if it's ever been any other day, but I think it's kind of just been Thursdays, and then, yeah, if you want it first week or second week.
Yeah, yeah. What do folks think about the second Thursday of the month? Is that still a good time? So I find, for me, it worked fine, but I don't know, it's a, you know, chance to revisit those things.
This is Brian. I'm fine with the second Thursday.
This is Carmela. I agree that the date works well. We have calendar appointments out there, I think, now as well for that day, so it doesn't conflict on that date.
Okay. Then do we want, so yeah, a couple of folks have spoken in favor of 12 to 1. Do we want to do a, does anyone want to put a motion on the table, whether it's 12 or it could be 11:45? We wanted to have a little buffer. Does anyone want to put a motion on the table for discussion or for?
Well, I guess, sorry, this will say again, one thing that I would say is that I think one thing that's contributed to short meetings with not a lot of interaction, I think is the online piece. So if there's a point in time in which we might have more people in this room, I would be hopeful that it would be, you know, just kind of have, you know, we just used to have more back and forth in conversation. I think that sometimes that can be hard with connection issues and whatnot. So if there is a chance that folks might be interested in coming back to this room, you know, it might be nice to hold some space in our calendar to be able to do that. But, you know, I'm completely in favor for 12 to 1 if that was what works better for people's calendars. But I do think that the online piece, we don't have as much discussion, I think. So that's probably why we have short meetings.
But I believe that's true too. Yeah, yeah, for you know, folks that were part of this group before the pandemic, which I think is just Lindsay and I, and then I guess Al previously. We used to be, you know, almost exclusively in person. But sometimes I think we would often have a conference call line, and so sometimes there would be one member maybe who had to call in, but typically we would be more in person. And I did find that this group did not really thrive in the transition to a more virtual world overall. I think that our engagement did fall off a lot, and I do find that in-person dynamics do contribute to a lot more discussion and also to the meeting length. So that is part of it too. I do recognize, you know, that life sort of happens, and it's a lot harder to it takes a lot more time to you know, physically drive here, be here. So I get why a lot of people want to participate virtually, but I do think that in-person participation would probably get the most out of this group, and individual members would probably get the most out of it by being here in person. I do believe that to be true.
I would say that.
Yeah, this is Matthew. Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I definitely prefer in person. Sorry about that. I had an initially planned trip, but with regards to the day, I think, you know, if we schedule it out, I can work around second Thursday or first Thursday, whichever works best for people. And then with regards to the time, I think kind of same, as long as we're scheduled out in advance, that should work. And if we want to squeeze it down to an hour, I think it just depends on kind of the next agenda item and what we want to do as a group and how in depth in this meeting we want to get with regards to talking about those reports or just reporting on them. But I think as long as we can get the work done, open to an hour meeting, and as long as we schedule it out, I think I'm flexible enough to be able to make it on first or second Thursday, whichever time works best for the group.
Thank you, Matthew. is, so we don't necessarily have to make a decision on this, but if we wanted to put that on the, if somebody wanted to put a motion on the table, certainly they could. I'm somewhat agnostic on the subject. I think that we did have a really compelling reason, I think, to make it a 90-minute meeting was that like we really just couldn't dig into the substance of something when we were having a lot of back and forth discussions. And I think those were good discussions. A lot of the time we really couldn't do that in an hour. We'd kind of sit here, get through our reports, and then we'd have like a little tiny bit of window of time, and we couldn't quite get through a topic, and then we have to revisit next month. So if we did start digging into a lot more substance, that would be an issue again. So we could table the issue or discuss further. Depends on the preferences of the group.
Well, I guess, and this is Matthew, one thing, if we do receive department assignments and get to a point next meeting where we can kind of start integrating those into the meeting agenda as either a report or discussion on project status for each individual, we could see how close we get to an hour and a half, or maybe an hour 15, just with a trial run of a little more substance in the meeting. If we've been having trouble getting quorum and kind of getting into the Budget Advisory Commission members portion of the meeting, it might be tough to tell whether an hour or an hour and a half would be better, just coming off of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So we could do that, and yeah, we could do that. See if how we get through a meeting when we're talking about our department assignments, and that would probably squeeze us in an hour. That would probably squeeze us pretty tight. Should we revisit this topic in the next month or two, or is that a good option?
That would be my recommendation if you guys are,
Okay.
Just because I think where you go from here and deciding how many topics you want to bring up and kind of things you want to look into might help you decide how much time you guys might need to really get into it. And for your October meeting, that's going to be the next year's budget, and so depending, I would assume you guys would want to take, some time to really have a conversation about that, and really dig into it. So I would recommend that at least for the October meeting, you continue to have the 90 minutes. Otherwise, I feel like you might fall short in getting some details or be able to ask questions.
Okay. Yeah, that is a good point. So maybe we should revisit. Our October meeting would definitely benefit us to have that extra time. Okay. Well, other item, review of department assignments and discuss project intents. So we haven't had a discuss this when we haven't convened with full quorum where there have been just a couple of us. There seemed to be interest in continuing the department assignments. We now have a couple new folks who have not gone through the process of having a department assignment and maybe have kind of don't necessarily have the full context for what this even is, but essentially we had done the practice as a BAC of each member being assigned a department, and sometimes if you got a really big department, that would be you just do one. But if you had a couple of small departments, you could do sometimes 2 or 3 departments, and then you meet with the director of those departments. You get a chance to review the budget, and then when it's that department specific budget, some of the things that drive their costs, some of their budgetary concerns, and then when it's time to review the full municipal budget, at the end of the year, we have kind of each person at the table is kind of a mini subject matter expert in a couple of departments, so we can have a bit of a more informed discussion about things. So I think that probably this is an opportunity for us to say, like, do we want to go ahead and do that still? Or do we want to do it differently? Do we want to have any discussion about doing, department assignments? What kinds of thoughts do folks have to offer?
Mr. Chair, this is Carmela Warfield, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I've been giving some consideration to this, to department assignments and how we could be most effective as volunteers serving on the BAC in this role. I'm sorry about the background noise. If there's any coming through, it's a little bit noisy where I'm at. But one of the things that I thought would be helpful to our group, and I wanted to bring it forward to the body, is rather than having individualized department assignments where each budget advisory commission member has to go and interview the department and then bring that information back, I would like to request that we consider having the departments present to the commission, as a whole, so that we could each hear and ask questions. And to the point earlier from one of the members, that would allow for some discussion and probably some natural process where folks would hear questions from another commission member, and then that would build on that. So we could all have benefit of the briefing at the same time, have benefit of hearing each other's questions and probably formulating some additional ones of our own. And then we all have the same look at the departments. And when we go back into, so then as we move through the process, we can use that to build on being an effective body. So that's my thought. I appreciate the individual subject matter experts, but I think it would be beneficial to us to have the ability to all hear from the same department heads, have those scheduled to come in to do a few presentations as we build up to the meetings, and then we could have those discussions. So thank you.
Yeah, Lindsay.
So I really like that idea. I think we are constrained by the number of departments and the number of months.
Yeah.
As Nolan mentioned, sometimes people have 3 departments. So maybe we could identify the biggest departments or the, some key departments to have come in and kind of take those off the table. And then we could so we could do it in conjunction. I think the one thing that I always kind of worry about, I think it's really valuable for us to go through this exercise. And I just want to make sure that, I know that we, have constraints on all of these departments, and I want to make sure that there's a value add for them as well, having us, having these meetings with us. My understanding is that these are kind of presentations that are already prepared and information that's already been prepared for other purposes. But as long as these departments are okay having these one-on-one meetings, maybe we can have the bigger ones come in, tackle those together, because those take up the largest percentage of the budget. And then we could continue. So maybe a hybrid.
Yeah, that's that is an interesting thought. I do get overwhelmed, to Lindsay's first point. I definitely, the number of departments that we have and the number of months in the year, it does make it hard to have all departments talk to us. So how many departments are there? 20 something?
30.
There's close to 30, yeah, about 30 departments, right? So it does get tough. There are, of course, a couple of departments that do account for, what is it, police and fire together are like 40-ish%, or close to 40%, I think.
I think it's almost 43%.
Yeah. So there are a couple of big departments. Like I remember one year I had the fire department, and that's just a beast, right? Just to comprehend the fire department budget alone. It's complex operations. So I do see some value in having the largest departments present to us. I think that actually does make some sense. Probably there is still, I think, if we really wanted to do a meaningful deep dive, I do think it's still a good idea to do some level of department assignments. I think last time when we had, sometimes I think the last go around I had like 3 departments. Sometimes having 3 is a lot. like maybe we don't need to have quite so many, because even if it's a smaller department, you still have that's 3 meetings to talk to 3 different department heads. Maybe we can think about a way to lighten the load on individual members a little bit, because that can be kind of heavy. But I don't know what other folks think for this. Yeah, Brian. Sorry, I think Brian had his hand raised.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to chime in as well. It's some observation from last year with the assignments. While I enjoyed the interviews that I did, I found that sometimes we had members who came on later who weren't really who either did not have assignments or got them later, or didn't hear the presentations from the members who did the interviews. So it did seem kind of choppy last year, and I feel like maybe we could find some way, the idea of the larger departments perhaps, but maybe we could have shorter presentations by the departments at our meetings, so that we, again, like Carmela said, we had the opportunity for us to all interview or have discussion as a group. It feels like maybe that is an avenue we should explore.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that, I do want to point out to like we have a meeting once a month and, there's only 12 in a year and we have other business to discuss. So it's hard to like think about how many, we could fit a couple departments into our general meetings, I think, but not more than a couple, I think. Otherwise we will really not have for other business. And still not get through all the departments. So I think we do have to kind of think within some of those time constraints. I personally like the idea of thinking about the, 3 or 4 largest departments and maybe having, BAC presentations by them. But if you don't want to do department assignments, I think that's a valid point as well. I think it is homework, it is extra work, it is difficult, it can be, it's a whole other thing to arrange meetings. I think that's a fair point. Probably would not be able to substitute it with in-person presentations for the whole group though, for very many departments.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could request for the departments that weren't weighted as the higher level, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, could we get a summation? The presentations, as you mentioned, the departments have already prepared. Could those be sent out as part of our agenda packets or part of our preparation materials for the budget process, but have those higher level folks present to us as a whole? And that way we could kind of find the sweet spot for everyone to be informationally prepared. And this is, and on that note, at the last meeting, Mr. Tomaney mentioned that he had a great binder that was provided to him when he was a new member of the Budget Advisory Commission, and that he references it especially and heavily through the budget process, but also throughout the meetings. I haven't received that binder, and I think that I would love to have a copy of that so that I could review what Mr. Tomaney is referring to. And I think he mentioned that it has different codes, information about the Budget Advisory Commission, and other helpful pieces of information. If that's something that could be made available to us as we work through the process, I'd be happy to come pick that up. Thank you. And to supplement these the department reviews. I know I'm a little bit moving to a topic that's beside of the department review process, but I wanted to add that in so we have the most effective consideration. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that the departments don't have a formal the conversations with the departments is something that the BAC has come up with as a tool for you guys to utilize in evaluation of the budget and through that process. And so the departments don't have a presentation that they normally give regarding their departments as far as the budget is concerned. Those work sessions with the assembly is a significantly higher level than that. It's not necessarily the kind of dive into each department that you guys are getting to familiarize yourself with those departments. And so it's not something that we would be able to produce. It would be something that would require them to produce something for this commission. So I might recommend that you guys kind of decide really what the intent was for this endeavor and what you're using it for, so that maybe we can get the outcomes that you guys are looking for in a way that if the department assignments are what you're looking for, but we can still get to those outcomes for you. I think that that would probably be the most helpful is, so, if it was for you guys to familiarize yourself with the departments in a more in-depth way, so that when you evaluate the budget, that it actually, you guys can have those discussions internally and be able to speak on the certain things for each department as far as the operations that they have and potentially what the impacts that you can see by different decisions and things that might happen. If you guys can have that without meeting with the departments, if you guys feel like getting into that much detail with the departments isn't necessary to have a robust conversation amongst yourselves, but truly what is the outcome you're looking for would be something where I would start and then see how you get there in doing that. And then I think what Al has might be something that he got not this term, but in previous terms, because I don't think anybody else has that. And I've been the director for a little over a year and I haven't produced any type of binder, but if there's something that you're looking for that we can provide or accommodate, please let me know. I think we provided the code to everybody in the last meeting. All of the handouts are online. We can send the BAC website to everybody and all of the recordings, all of the agendas, and then all of the handouts that are provided in each meeting are always recorded there, along with the historical information. So previous years and meetings are all in that location as well, so.
Yeah. I was gonna say, the binder that I was referring to, I'm pretty sure it's from when he was first appointed to BAC, probably many years ago before any of them.
Could we see what Mr. Tomani's table of contents of his binder is, and if there's something that would be supplemental and helpful to summarize for the so the commission can be, as volunteers, we want to be as impactful and as helpful as we can, and still work that into our schedules. And I know you all feel the same way. I know Courtney and you and your team feel the same way, and Mr. Chair, you feel the same way. Could we at least cross-reference what that is if a prior department put it together for volunteers? Maybe it predates the website, so maybe there's nothing there and we just need to reference to the website. But if Al could send that over to you, if there's a table of contents, you could take a look, and if there's something that we're missing that could help us do our jobs effectively in these volunteer roles, I'd be grateful for that. So is that a good workaround, a good solution?
I think you bring up, good points, Carmela. There's the orientation and grounding to how you join BAC. I think a lot of times we kind of you just join a meeting and then you figure it out from there, right? But I do want to keep us back on our main topic about the department assignments and project intent and what we want to do with it. And one point that I do want to mention is that I really there really is an onus on all of us on this commission, like to come to the table prepared and to have a lot of, and to have done our homework. We do have a really important job. I mean, reviewing the municipal budget is a beast. It is a complex document that has a lot of different priorities to it. And I think it's very, I don't understand how any one person can comprehend the whole thing of it. So I think that any way we can chop it up or however we want to do the work is important. I do think that to do our job well, we need to do homework. We need to come to the table with a lot of things to discuss. We need to be able to actually, create value for the administration and for the assembly. I think that's really important. So I really do urge folks not to take a totally passive role to the commission in general. I think that you do need to think about this as an obligation and a duty, and we all have a part to play. It's not just passively commenting on stuff in meetings, in my opinion. Do we have, is there more about department assignments and what we want to do there? I'm sorry, I think we did have a couple of hints. I think Rachel, I think you had your hand up, and then Matthew.
Yeah, thank you. I did. So I wanted to piggyback on what Ms. Warfield and Mr. Flynn said. As a volunteer, to Carmela's point, I think it would be critical to have a table of contents because, yeah, we do have a duty to come in and be prepared. But like you said, it's a huge place and it is a beast. So having some sort of roadmap to help us prepare more effectively and in greater depth, I think would be very valuable. And it absolutely relates to our assignments. I would be in favor of a hybrid where maybe we as a group picked the top 5 or 6 that we want to hear as a group. And then everybody could have individual assignments with the departments that weren't part of that main group. I did mine last year and I did get prepared material and binders from both departments that I was able to interview, but I was never able to successfully connect with my third department. So I didn't give a brief on it. And I think other people had similar experiences. So I would absolutely be in favor of getting a roadmap if Al wouldn't mind providing that, because I think it would aid us in being better prepared for our part department assignments and a group brief on key components of the budget. That's it.
Thank you. And Al, I don't know if that's something you have, if you want to share it with the group somehow or scan it or something along those lines so we can see what materials there are. Might be some guidance. There may be some guidance we can package and put together for the group. I think I think that's certainly reasonable to have like a body of information that we all start with. But I do want to get to Matthew, who had his hand up for a while.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just to kind of, I guess, add my voice to what everybody else's opinion is. I think it could be good just to do a committee of the whole for maybe the top 2 or 3. I know we only have so many meetings, and this is just following the 1 hour versus hour and a half discussion. If we want to do more of them, it'd probably run towards an hour and a half for sure. But I guess doing that, and then if we have department assignments, it'd be nice to do in-person meetings. I'd like to go do those and at least have like a subject matter expert within the commission to split up the budgets. But at a minimum, there's the guidelines for this project that I think Courtney had sent out at the end of last meeting. And those have good questions. And I guess at a minimum, you could get a memo from the departments that you're responsible for and present the memo to the group during group presentations. Just, I guess, a little bit lower effort version, again, as volunteers, and everybody else has extra time commitments as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the practicalities of doing it, what do you think about, Courtney, about having, the largest departments give presentations, and then think about like department assignments that from there of smaller departments, maybe we can go, one department per person, not necessarily multiple, make it a little bit easier on folks. Is that an approach that's reasonable, that makes sense?
I think if you want the departments to come in here, we're gonna have to have, is the guidelines what you guys want them to be prepared to discuss, or is it something different? So if you're asking them to prepare something for you, we're gonna have to tell them what that is.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to be able to explain that or give them something that is going to give them enough information to prepare something to bring here to this group. Not just say, please attend this meeting and be prepared to talk about your department, because I would suspect that the majority of departments would not bring material to present to you based on that information. So if the guidelines are what you would like to continue with, and that's what we present to them, I think that they could maybe come up with something to be able to come and discuss with you about. But if there's something larger or more information you want from them, then I think that's something we would have to express to them to make sure that they're.
Right. I think what folks would probably be wanting is sort of like fairly high level overview of what it is that our department spends its resources on, right? And what some of their priorities are, and what does their staffing budget look like, and their equipment budget, and their operating, I think some kind of a high level tour of their finances, I think, is what we'd be talking about. And I don't know if they generally give a presentation like that to the assembly, especially like police and fire, or not, but is there?
Not, there's a lot of committees through the assembly, and they have more general specific topics that they discuss with them. They're not necessarily, I think what you guys are looking for is a very larger view of the departments, where I think that a lot of the committees are into kind of the weeds of certain things that are going on. So like as Assemblymember Brawley had pointed out with the port, that they, are into this tariffs and the design specs and everything, where I think if you had a conversation with the port, you guys might be a much larger view of, how many employees do you guys actually have? Like, how big is the port? How much cargo does go across the dock? Like those kind of things, and not necessarily into the weeds of those. So I don't think the departments necessarily have that kind of boilerplate information already prepared.
No, that's a fair point. Okay, so we do have a couple of hands raised. I think Rachel, you're first in the queue.
Sorry, I didn't unraise my hand from before. I'll take care of that.
Okay. No worries. Then Carmela, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would offer that we could provide the department heads with the Budget Advisory Commission Department Reviews Learning Assignment document that's provided to us, or that was provided is on the website for and provided to us prior, with those guiding questions that were created, I believe, by the I assume by the OMB folks that they're good questions. I think they bring the high level review that is discussed in the document itself and would be a great starting point. And there could be some organic questions that come from that. But if they could see the overview, the assignment, the suggested discussion questions for each department director and the purpose explanation, I think that would probably be great and helpful for those folks in preparing for those. And then if we could just, you know, if there's a time limitation and then a budget for questions, I think that would be what we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Matthew, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, sorry, my internet's cutting out just a little bit, so if I'm a little choppy. But I know we're running out of time, so I'll be just really brief. But I guess just the summation for me would be that it would be good, I think, to have department assignments. It's a kind of an important, a good note that, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it's dropping out a little on my, but it could be good to do the. Sorry.
Oh, and I think we just started to lose you. Still with us, Matthew?
Yeah, sorry about that. The fire alarm in my building just started to go off, but it stopped real quick. So, you know how it goes. No, it could be good to do a department assignments. I think that would be good. I'd like that. And if we do a committee as a whole, I mean, we could even still have a department assignment for that person, for that committee or for that department. And if the person who is assigned that wants to go further in depth, they can, or not. But then at least then we'd still have somebody to speak to it if we wanted to go more in depth on something like that. But I'm supportive of having assignments, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So these are the
Yeah.
questions that you guys had come up with before when you discussed this, you know, this project and going forward with it. So if it's something that, those are the questions still that remain relevant. The expectation is that we have anyone coming to the September meeting, I would need to know what departments you guys would like to be here, for me to be able, and I would suggest that you pick a couple. You know, right now you guys were kind of planning like 25 to 30-minute meetings with these departments.
Right.
You know, with these, so if you have 2 departments coming here, you should expect to spend about an hour, you know, in discussions with just those 2 departments, plus, you know, the reports. So I'm not sure that you would be able to get anyone else, but I would expect maybe pick 2 or 3 departments, because I can't guarantee that, you know, they won't have other meetings at the same time, you know, for September. So if you pick your top 2 and then maybe an alternate or 2, we can see who we can have attend for the September meeting, if this is something that you guys want to start in September, or if you want to kind of push it back and have different discussions for the next meeting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the timing, I guess if we wanted to make it timely for the current budget cycle, then we probably would want to start in September if that's possible. So you'd suggest that we pick a couple of departments as a group like now, and then you see who's available kind of, and then these would be the questions that they would be able to kind of share with us and present on.
If that is what you guys, yes, if you guys would like to stay with these questions, if you think that these are the ones that are still relevant to get you, you know, the conversation, the data, then we could continue with these questions and provide these to them and request that they attend the meeting instead of, you know, the department assignment.
I think these are good questions still. I think these are good and basic, you know, they draw out a lot of information about how departments work. I think these are well-chosen questions. I don't remember how we originally got them, but they look like very good. Yeah, I think they're good questions. I think they get to the point of it. Then I would say, what if, I don't know if folks, I know we are just about out of time, so to wrap things up. I mean, I'd say my instinct on this, if we have to pick a couple departments to go through, is that we you know, talk about the big ones, right? So police and fire are the big ones, and then we could also probably treat like the departments that are under community and economic development, under land sport, like those could be almost treated as, I mean, I don't know if that could be treated as one or if that's too many.
That's a lot.
things to talk about.
Yeah, because he has, so under community development, there's the development services, planning, side of it, and then there's the public work side of it.
Right,
And within each one of those is multiple departments. So
right.
there's roughly, I think, 6 departments that report to the community development director. So,
Should he present on maybe the public works?
so that would be M&O, so maintenance and operations, project management, engineering, traffic engineering, and there's one more.
So still too broad.
I think that it depends on, I mean, if your focus is on like maintenance and operations, then you're probably gonna wanna have that conversation, because I think each one of them is going to bring you something different, so maintenance and operations deals with the maintenance of the roads, snow plowing and facilities. Project management and engineering is the one, they're the big ones that deals with like the bond projects
Yeah,
and do all of the road, like large load road capital projects. And then traffic engineering is gonna give you a different perspective on the road projects from a, traffic perspective, count, intersections that are busy and,
Right.
that kind of data. So I think each one of them has their own. And I don't know if you probably couldn't do another department if you did those in one. That would probably be your one for.
Well, if we could, I think that police and fire is probably the biggest one. So if we could, if that's not a possibility, just because we're like kind of short on time.
right. Maybe if anyone wants to lob out an idea for a third department that we could, that Courtney could try to get, for September. If anybody's interested in a particular one, police and fire may jump out for just being such a large share of the budget, but there's all kinds of other possibilities. There's, the health department is an interesting, large, complicated one. There's the library, right? It's a department. Anybody have, building services, planning, public works? Anybody have a favorite?
Real quick, sorry, quick question, Courtney, when is the 120 days before? What's the date on that?
So that's gonna be September 1st.
Okay. I'm this is Matthew speaking. I guess I'm okay with police and fire since we if we want to work within the budget cycle, we only have a little bit of time. So.
There's Parks and Rec, there's real estate services, there's a lot of stuff going on, as far as housing things, it's kind of, I know police and fire are the big ones that everyone kind of thinks of, but what are the things that are going on, right now, the community things that we're looking at that you guys might be interested in learning more about, a department that might actually address those things. So, maintenance and operations, do you want to talk to them about snow plowing? I know some of you guys that were here back in January, February, we had Paul Van Landingham, who is the street maintenance supervisor, come in and kind of talk a little bit more about that. So if you guys have enough information already, then maybe that's one that.
Maybe, what about, I would say, I'd like public works. I don't know, that's another very large department for responsibilities.
So public works is the blanket that covers,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Parks and Recreation is a good one.
Okay. Public transportation is a big one. So.
Yeah, public transportation is one that would be, I think, pretty heavily impacted by potential cuts.
So could we start with police and fire? If that doesn't work, maybe we could do like a little email
Yeah,
about a second and third
Okay,
option.
okay,
I think that's probably reasonable.
okay.
Then I think to kind of wrap things up, I don't think there's a spot for audience participation. I don't think we have any member of the public present or online. So I think that one is taken care of. Next meeting would be on September 14th. And that would be where we discuss some department stuff, whatever we end up with. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you very much, Matthew. And then I think unless there are objections, we are adjourned then. Thanks very much. I appreciate everybody's participation today.
Thank you, guys. I'll be there in person next month.
All right.
Thank you.